proclamations. And the first one being Darwin Day, February 12th. Whereas February 12th, 2017 is the anniversary of the birth of Charles Darwin in 1809, and whereas his work has made great contributions to the human understanding of our world and the universe we live in, and whereas the anniversary of Darwin's birthday is an appropriate time on which to reflect and celebrate the importance of scientific advancement to all people. Now, therefore, I, Alice Lutz, Deputy Mayor, do hereby proclaim that February 12, 2017 shall be Darwin Day in the district of Sechelt. Our next proclamation is Toastmasters Month, February 2017. And in our audience tonight, we have, of the Sechelt group, Haida Bolton, from the Gibson's Morning Star Club, Joanna Jeppa, and the area director, Sheila Cameron. So I'll read the proclamation and welcome those guests. Whereas Toastmasters International, a nonprofit educational organization, is a leader in making effective oral communication a national and international reality for all persons. And whereas Toastmasters programs help people develop skills in speaking, listening, and other vital skills that enhance leadership potential and foster understanding. And whereas there are 2 active Toastmaster clubs on the Sunshine Coast that meet regularly to continue to promote the goals, visions, missions, and core values of Toastmasters International. And whereas Toastmasters International has designated February as Toastmasters Month, now therefore I, Alice Lutz, do hereby proclaim that February 2017 shall be known as Toastmasters Month in the district of Sechelt. I just have to say that I was a member of Toastmasters, and it's a very helpful learning experience if you want to be able to speak in public. I sometimes think I need to go back for a refresher. Our final proclamation for tonight is White Cane Week, February 5th to the 11th. And I'm only going to read the last 2 whereas. Whereas the Canadian Council for the Blind has designated February 5th to the 11th as White Cane Week to raise public awareness of the challenges facing Canadians living with vision loss through events sponsored by the Canadian Council of the Blind chapters within their local communities. And whereas the Sechelt chapter of the Canadian Council for the Blind will host an information table at Trail Bay Mall from the 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on February 11th. Now, therefore, I, Alice Lutz, do hereby proclaim that February 5th to the 11th, 2017, shall be known as White Cane Week in the district of Sechelt. I would also like to introduce, I believe Bill is in the audience, Bill Conway, who has been very active both locally, provincially, and internationally with the White Cane Association and the Council for the Blind. And I just would like to recognize that you're here. Thank you for the proclamation. Okay. We have item 5.1, minutes of the 4 p.m. regular council meeting of January 18th. Could I have someone move the minutes. Seconded. Any questions or comments around that minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Item 5.2, minutes of the regular council meeting Wednesday, January 18th. Could I have a mover and seconder? Move, seconded. Any questions or comments around any errors or omissions? Yes, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. On page 12, recommendation 2, this is with reference to the Rotary Club. And in the first line, it says the building of a band shell. Was it in fact a band shell or was it a gazebo?
I believe it was a gazebo.
My understanding was that it was a gazebo, and we probably need to correct that because a band shell and the gazebo are very different for me. I'm not sure about others. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Well, I just wanted to follow up on that point and perhaps get some clarity on it because, I don't know, I went back through the minutes. I was kind of excited about a band shell. And it was recorded in a couple places as band shell, so I'm just wondering if we could. But I wasn't at the meeting, so.
Through the staff.
Through your worship, I believe that the Rotary Club referred to it as both a gazebo and a band shell, and there would definitely be reference to both of those items throughout the meeting.
So maybe we need to clarify them with the Rotary, right? Okay.
Clarification. When the report comes back to council, please check with the Rotary when publishing the report so that we'll know if it's going to be a band shell or a gazebo, or a gazebo that can be used as a band shell. Yes.
For further clarification, through your worship, this recommendation will come forward at the Financial, Cultural, and Economic Development Committee meeting.
Thank you. So at this stage, we can't amend the minutes because it's reflected what was said. Any other questions or comments around the minutes? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item 7.1, minutes of the Finance and Cultural and Economic Development meeting, January 11th, for endorsement. Pages 20 to 22. Moving. And seconded by Councillor Shanks. Any questions or comments around these minutes? Councillor Mueller.
I guess I just wanted to maybe check back with council or perhaps with our finance officer on recommendation number 7 and the time noted for neighborhood associations. I know that I received some comments from mine and I passed those forward, but I'm just curious if others were able to and if we adapted that at all in the process.
CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I believe I've got everything from the various neighborhood associations. Not every one of them responded, but we have collected from the majority of them. What comes to mind is Sandy Hook, East Porpoise Bay, and West Sechelt. I believe that's all we've received at this point.
Thank you. Anything further? No further questions? All in favor for endorsement? Item 7.2, minutes of the Planning and Community Development meeting of January 25th, 2017 for endorsement, pages 23 to 26. Motion to move. Thank you. Second. Comments or questions around these recommendations? Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. 6.1 on page 24 and 6.2 on page 25. Just a request of staff that when we bring these forward, that we actually perhaps include an address or something in here, because referring back, if we've got a name down the road, right now we know what this is, but down the road, we'd have to actually go back through minutes to find out what we're referring to. So just a little more clarification. Thanks.
Thank you. Anything further around these recommendations for endorsement? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. Bylaws. Item 8.1, District of Sechelt Development Cost Charges. And I turn to our move receipt. Second. And our corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is Development Cost Charge Bylaw number 554, 2016. Pardon? In front of council for adoption. Council did give 3 readings to the bylaw earlier this year. Third reading was done on November 16th. We then forwarded it to the Ministry of Community, Sport, Cultural Development for the Inspector of Municipalities review. We've received their approval, so it's now in order in front of you for adoption.
Thank you. Comments? Councillor Seegers. No. Councillor Wright, beat you.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. A couple of things. First of all, this has been a long time coming, so thanks to all of the staff who worked on this and got it to where it is today. Just a minor comment. We'll have to change the date for adopted this day from 2016 to 2017. And could I have a comment about the grace period with reference to this bylaw, just so that the public is very much aware that there is a grace period?
Thank you. Mr. Thompson.
Yeah. Through the Worship. So yes, there is a grace period of 1 year after the adoption of a bylaw such as this for any relevant development applications. That includes subdivisions, rezonings, development permits, and active building permits. So if someone does have a active application that is complete at this time, the DCC bylaw won't take effect until 1 year after the adoption.
Thank you. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. So further clarification on that. If somebody comes forward with a development application during that period, what you're saying is they have 1 year in order to complete that process, or they'll be subject to the new DCC bylaws, or how does it, I guess what I'm looking for is how will it be implemented? You know, at what stage in the development, et cetera, do they need to be, and how is this going to be communicated to the public? Because we need to get this out. So what is our communication plan that's in process? Thanks.
Thank you. I'll ask you to turn yours off, and I'll.
So for your first question, if there is a application, for example, that comes in tomorrow, assuming you adopt it tonight, they would be subject to the new fees. The grace period is only for in-stream applications. As for our communication strategy, though we haven't finalized this, the idea is to send the initial idea is to send a letter to all current application holders to inform them about that timeline.
Thank you. And Councillor Mueller.
All right, there we go. But we're back in order. I think Darren will
so.
be after me. Councillor Inkster. I just wanted to provide a couple comments, I guess, now that we're on the eve of adopting this bylaw. to echo the sentiments put forward by Councillor Wright, it has been a long time coming, and throughout the whole development of this process, I've really been looking at it through the lens of the real large-scale infrastructure deficit that exists in most municipalities. And here in Sechelt, we've decided to take some action on that. With the adoption of this bylaw, we would be looking at, and anybody who's interested, flip to Schedule B, just the sheer number of long-term projects that will be possible. There's no parallel funding that would allow those projects to go ahead. And so with this, if it is adopted, it will be, I estimate, somewhere close to about half of our infrastructure problem dealt with almost immediately at adoption of this bylaw. Moving forward, there are other things that have to happen on the on our operations side that will bring us potentially to some kind of full agreement on that. And so I would be very happy to see this pass. And I just wanted to make that comment. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting, as the time has passed since the original DCC bylaw was in place a number of years ago, the argument became stronger in terms of in inflationary and costs of providing services in the district. So this one seemed to move quite quickly through our process and be accepted, and is accepted by the population. It'll be interesting to see what happens as of after tonight's meeting, or in 5 minutes, what the reaction will be for those that hadn't put their application in previous to this, because as we've indicated, the new rates will be applicable at that point, and it might see a substantial change in you know, the project costs, but it's more reflective of the actual cost of providing services. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I too will say fantastic. This is a long time coming. I know my first year on council, which is now almost 9 years ago, we talked about this bylaw. So it's been long in the coming. Do I have someone to move the recommendation? Councillor Shanks and Councillor Wright, and the recommendation is number 2, correct? That you're moving? Yes. Any other comments around that? Yep.
Thank you. I do want to stress to staff that I believe we do need to be proactive and get some communication out broadly across the community to let them know that this is actually, if we pass it, looks like it's going to go, but if we do, that it actually is taken effect, and that they refer to our website, I suppose, for updated information. So something in the paper, maybe on the radio. Let's get the information out. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Now, item 8.1b, Development Cost Charges Bylaw, number 554. Can I look to the corporate officer to read the appropriate sections?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is the actual bylaw, number 554, a bylaw to impose development cost charges. It once adopted, should council adopt it, it will provide for DCCs and to be used for the projects specified in the attached schedules. Would now, and I would also note a correction on page 33 that it say adopted this, that it will say adopted the first day of February 2017, not 16. Thank you. And so it's before you for consideration of adoption.
Motion to move it? Councillor Seegers and Councillor Wright. Any comments or questions? Move adoption. All those in favor? Have we done that correct? Thank you. I'm sure it'll be on the front page. So, business items, 10.1. A request for a decision around Rockwood Lodge and the Canada 150 grant. I turn to our Arts and Culture and Communication Coordinator.
Motion to receive. Motion to receive.
Yeah, receipt, moved and seconded. And All in
you.
favor of receipt? Thank you.
Thank you. So before you is a report regarding a new grant that was announced by the province of BC. And I am requesting this evening that staff be given permission to apply for a grant from this new program. It's a one-time program. And that council also consider providing $17,000 towards this project. The project being the repair and restoration of the drainage system at the Rockwood Lodge, our heritage building in Rockwood Gardens. And the grant in particular that I'm requesting permission to apply to will provide a maximum of 80% of project budget. And we have estimated $85,000 as a overall project budget, and so the minimum 20% that we would need to contribute if we were to be successful in this would be $17,000.
Thank you. It's my understanding that we can apply but are not committed to go ahead if the budget does not approve that spending. Is that correct?
If that were the case, we would need to contact them immediately and let them know that we are no longer moving forward with the project and we have not committed money to it.
Thank you. Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. I think if we were to, although others don't like chasing money, I would think it would be wise if we receive this funding that we find the money within our budget, if in fact that happens, although the processes will probably be happening concurrently because of the fact that it's a building that's identified as a heritage building that we will most likely have to do the work anyway. So this is one of those, this sort of reminds me of the band shell, where if somebody else does most of the work for us and it's an amenity that many people want, that it would probably be wise of us to find the money within our budget. So in terms of this heritage building, you know, if we're going to foresee that we're going to have to do the work, let's just wish this application luck, and I thank staff for identifying the funding opportunity. What I did want to ask, though, was through you to finance, if in fact, because this is an internally generated staff initiative, whether we've identified some room within our budget for that amount. I mean, we discuss sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then sometimes we have trouble finding 17,000. So for such a good project. So I wanted to ask through you if in fact it's been already identified.
To finance, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, well, no, it has not been identified. The intention would be to bring this to the Finance, Culture, and Economic Development Committee next week as part of the additional requests and the unfunded projects for the committee's consideration at that time.
Okay.
Ideally, we'll be identifying funding sources for all the projects that are there. It'll be up to the committee whether to accept or reject those decisions.
Thank you. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I have a few questions on here. Do we know what the turnaround time is to hear if we're successful or not?
You're not going on.
Can we get a couple turned
Oh,
There we go.
I don't. So this fund was just very recently announced. It became available January 16th. They are still actually actively answering questions generally because it's a one-time grant. It's never existed before, won't exist again. If you are successful, you are required to complete the work within 1 year. So presumably they're hoping for a pretty quick turnaround in being able to notify successful applicants, but they have not stated what that turnaround time will be yet. The deadline to apply is February 10th, but how many weeks beyond that will take them to provide an answer, I don't know.
Okay, and then one other question. On page 43, 8.2, it's stipulated that this could potentially, repaired basement could be repurposed for community use, potentially for archives. I would like to see a business case come forward with that, if that's something that is proposed. Because in this case, if we're having water issues, I would have serious concerns about putting archives in there in case something like this could damage those archives down the road.
Of course.
I know we're looking to fix it, but,
Yeah.
so a business case would need to come forward.
Of course, as would we. We wouldn't want to put something like that down there unless we were absolutely certain it was a safe place for that. But there could potentially be other community uses for it.
Councillor Mueller.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I would just like to congratulate staff for the quick turnaround on this. I know it was not very long ago that this funding was announced, and looks like we might have a shot of getting in there before the deadline. My question was about the scope of the work. They mentioned some potential damage done to the interior, but most of the discussion is around the exterior drainage, and I'm just curious, is there a substantial amount of interior work to be done on that building?
At this time, there's some damage just from the constant water that's been in there, so drywall will need to be removed and replaced. The current flooring is a cement, like a basement cement flooring, so any cleanup would need to be done. We haven't had a chance to do really detailed inspection into what damage might be behind the walls at this time. We know the drywall has taken on water. We don't know what's behind that yet. So we haven't had the opportunity to do a real thorough investigation of the interior, but we're very aware of the problems on the exterior and with the drainage. I do actually have a statement here from our building maintenance department about all of the work that needs to get done. The exterior is a little bit more urgent, and then the interior is something we would work on if we were able to get the funding for that as well. Ideally, if we are successful in getting this grant, we will be able to have funding to cover both jobs, both the exterior drainage and then be able to make the updates to the inside. It is a finished basement. So many people here have probably never been there because we don't typically use it at this time, but it's a proper finished basement with a bathroom and a little kitchenette and built-in cabinets. And so it's just a matter of dealing with any of the water damage.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to get a sense of it. Sometimes with these projects, the final costs do tend to exceed. But in every single community across Canada that I've been to, there's a fantastic heritage building that has been lovingly restored. And, if the community has money, that's a fantastic thing for a community. So I'm very much in favor of this.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Wright is next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I noticed that we have the ability to apply for $100,000, and I guess I'm kind of curious why we didn't apply for the max. Because as Councillor Mueller indicated, when you get into water, if the drywall's damaged, I can tell you that the studs and the plates behind it are also damaged and will need to be replaced. And quite often what happens is with these projects is they just take on a life of their own, and the cost they just skyrocket. I hope we have a contingency in there, but I can't see the budget, so I don't know what that is. And I guess I'll support this, but I guess what this really speaks to me about is that we don't do any condition assessment of our assets. And that really bothers me. When I see statements in here, that they're missing downpipes and gutters, and then I hear that you have a list of all the maintenance items that need to be done on this building. The question that starts to run through my mind is, I wonder where we're spending our money if we're not looking after our assets in that particular department. And that gives me real pause to be concerned about what we're doing. I'll leave it at that. I don't need an answer to that. But when we start going through the budget, you can believe this one will be coming up again.
Did you want me to answer the question? Okay.
Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I guess it gives us, as we move forward, we just have to remember how many buildings we build because we have to then have money to look after them over a number of years. So we have to be careful if we want Empire built. Anyway, the Rockwood Lodge is an interesting one because I think we used to, in the past, new councils used to tour facilities more. And that's a one that council should probably take a look at because I think the basement, and Siobhan could correct me, either it's partially or wholly foundational in the basement. I don't know how much gyprock is down there. And it'll be interesting to see because that may be the perfect building until we have a works building for the archives because of the weight of the archives to put them in the basement rather than anywhere else. So I hope we can identify, the shape that it's in and the porousness of the original building because I think it is. And this is a question that I would ask of staff rather than the last one is I believe it's original cement down there as far as I can paint it because I've been in the basement a number of times. So do you recall?
It's a finished basement. The basement was lowered in approximately 1983 so that you could actually walk into it. So
Yeah.
the building was built in 1935-36. And then around the time that it was designated heritage and District of Sechelt took over ownership and maintenance of the building, the basement was lowered. So some of the basement is from the 80s. It looks like a finished basement. It is in theory, usable, livable space. It's just that the drainage has failed and the basement is taking on water. So it's not currently usable, but it would be otherwise if we could address the drainage issues. It's not completely underground. There are windows on the front side of it, the side that faces towards downhill.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer?
Sort of. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the building.
And just to be clear, when I refer to community archives, I do mean the Sechelt Community Archives that's currently located in the library and not our own archives that.
Business archives.
Yeah, only because you were mentioning Public Works building and archives.
Mm-hmm. There's lots of archives. Yeah.
Thank you.
When we have to protect them. So, yeah, I know what you're saying.
Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I think Jafon's being very generous when she's referring to our maintenance department, because we have one maintenance person. And I think he's doing a fantastic job. I think it's through his efforts that we're finding these things that need to be replaced and addressed throughout the various buildings that we have. So through you to staff, we have an issue in a building. So I think we would need something coming forward in budget to address the required repairs that need to happen, whether or not we get the grant. Mm-hmm. So we'll need to see some kind of rationale and budget potentially for that amount as well, because we can't leave the drainage issues to go if we don't get the budget or get the grant coming through. Okay, thanks.
And could I have someone, sorry, Ms. Hoagland.
Through your worship, that has been taken into consideration and will be coming forward as part of the overall package of additional budget requests. To give Councillor Wright a bit of comfort, staff have definitely recognized the need for an asset management plan. And our facilities maintenance person has definitely been working towards a comprehensive checklist for facilities. So you're correct in that we haven't had one, but staff have truly been working towards that goal.
Thank you. And could I ask a councillor to move one or more recommendations? Councillor Seegers has moved recommendations 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. Seconded by Councillor Shanks. Any questions or comments around these recommendations? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Business item 10.2, requests for decision, the official community plan amendment bylaw number 492. I turn to Mr. Thompson. Oh, first I want the report received. Moved and seconded. All those in favor of receipt? Carried. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is to correct a missed step in the OCP amendment adoption process. In accordance with Local Government Act, Section 477, Council must first consider an OCP amendment in conjunction with its waste management plan and financial plan before going to public hearing. That was not done before going to the first public hearing for the Westbrook by the Sea facility. Therefore, if Council wishes to move forward, it must first consider it in conjunction with the financial plan and the waste management plans, then have another public hearing.
Thank you. My understanding is that all of the previous submissions that came to the public hearings would again be submitted so that people, unless they have more to add, wouldn't need to resubmit, correct? Thank you.
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Okay, questions? Councillor Cedars.
Thank you. On page 51, under policy implications, it says that in the first paragraph that the applicant should separate construction waste, and it's recommended that the applicant consider options for organics, recyclables, and pharmaceutical waste collection in the design of the facility. So do we know if they've done that?
We haven't got to that point, no.
So we are saying that we are looking at this in conjunction with our solid waste management plan, and this is one of the recommendations of the SCRD. So will this show up in their consideration and further documentation going forward?
Yeah, we'd have to speak with the applicant about that.
Okay.
And as some members of council may know, we don't have a development permit process for this facility, which makes it difficult to include, say, the requirement to have on-site recycling facilities or other waste management facilities. On-site, that is, collection facilities.
Thank you.
I understand that's only to do with form and character. The rest of it we actually do have oversight on. So I'd like to know that that is actually addressed before I'd be willing to support this. Because this is something that we're requiring that they do, particularly because of the pharmaceuticals that are being dealt with at this facility. It will be, it's the type of people and the types of things that they're going to be using. So I'm not willing to support this at this point until we can have an answer for that question. Thanks.
Councillor Shanks.
Yes, do we have a time frame for third public hearing on this?
Through your worship, we were looking at scheduling it for February 16th.
Any further questions or comments around this? Yes. Councillor Seegers.
Can we get an answer for that? This will be coming back to council. No, it won't. This will be going straight to public hearing from this if we pass it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we don't have an answer for how they're going to be dealing with the recommendations that came from the SCRD with regards to solid waste. Okay.
Councillor Mueller.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak perhaps for one brief moment about some of the concerns raised by Councillor Seegers. Currently, these are good recommendations coming from the SCRD. Currently on almost all job sites, construction waste is already recycled into different categories. The situation for organics, recyclables, and pharmaceutical waste, that's something that can be fairly easily handled in most buildings. It's tough with this particular application because we don't have a DP. So where it could have been handled would have been as an issue related to rezoning. And so with the process, it's not easy to correct this. We're already trying to correct something that's quite major. So just wanted council to keep that in mind.
Thank you. Councillor Shanks?
Yeah, I would suggest that that information could be made available to the public hearing.
Is that possible?
I could speak with the applicant before that and try to arrange something.
Thank you. That would be helpful. I'm sorry?
It's a brand new public hearing.
Yep.
Not subject to it.
So we can have new information.
Mm-hmm.
Anything further? Is someone willing to make recommendations 2 and/or 3? Yes, Councillor Mueller. And seconded by Councillor Wright. All those in favor of recommendations 2 and 3? Opposed? Thank you. Business item 10.3, a request for decision around zoning bylaw 25, Clayton Family Lands. Could I have a motion to receive the report? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Carried. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is to address a council question of staff regarding the adaptable housing requirements that were brought to the attention of council at the, I believe it was December 15th, December 21st, Planning Committee, Development Committee through a delegation. And this is, in this report contains the analysis of the concerns raised by the applicant and the conditions of adoption. And without going through the full analysis, the recommendations are that council take essentially no action in terms of their request and keep them as is. However, if council does wish to move forward, I have provided another option that could also be amendable.
Questions or comments around the report? Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. I guess I have several concerns. In the original report, well, apparently we haven't got a policy in terms of dealing with adaptable housing. It was talked about back in 2006, but nothing ever happened as regards to policy. And in the initial report we got, it indicated that the 18 lots were to, in fact, accommodate adaptable housing. Now we're faced with a situation of future phases being requested or required to do that. And for me, it just seems out of context with other developments that have occurred where that requirement or provision hasn't been necessary. So I guess I'm not too satisfied with the rationale that's has been put forward here in the report, and I need a better understanding of why the Clayton Westbrook development of Phase 2A, Clayton Family Lands, was initially required to make all the lots, 18 lots, potentially adaptable for affordable housing, and no other development in recent history has been required to do that. And then when we come back, not only that, but we're looking at future phases be required to fulfill the same requirement. It just seems a bit out of context for me, so I'm having an issue with this.
Councillor Seegers.
Sorry, did you? Oh.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm afraid I take the other side of this. I went to our website and I pulled up the accessible and adaptable housing design guidelines that were posted, put together in December 2010, when the proponent's consultant was actually working for the district. There are three or four levels under this. It doesn't say they have to go to the most extreme. And given our population, with the number of people we have in the community who are elderly, we have a lot of scooters, all those kinds of things. The basic guidelines are an accessible path of travel, one no-step entrance, a passable interior circulation, so interior doors that are a little wider, and access to a main floor washroom. That's the basic guidelines for accessibility and adaptability. Doesn't require all of the other things like switches and cupboards and everything else. This is minimal. The cost of this would not be extensive for the builder or for the people buying it. So I'd like to actually see it for all developments because of the population that we have. Anybody who gets, it doesn't even have to be somebody older. Anybody who, recently there was a lady who is an architect in our community who broke her leg. She had difficulty in her own house. So this is not, it's not onerous on the developer. So I'm supporting staff in moving this forward as it is.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Mueller.
I guess, the thing here is really, the issue to me is not whether adaptability is a good or a bad idea. I agree with Councillor Seegers in the fact that these are simple changes to make on a building. The issue is about fairness and the requirements based on other builders and at other times. And so perhaps we've heard that this has never been required of any other builder. We should have a clear policy on this moving forward. If we're going to do this, if we're going to require this of every builder, then I'm for it. And if we're going to require it of one builder, then I'm likely not in favor.
Thank you. Comments? Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. I think there's been a couple of good arguments there, and it's good to see that the adaptable housing requirements that were introduced a number of years ago with one of the staff members introducing it, and of course I was here at that time, were referred to. I do want to know, though, and get clarification if possible through you, Madam Chair, if in fact this is a one-off application and in fact we're not requiring others, because that would be fairly germane to the discussion and decision if in fact it's a one-off application and we're not doing a general application of those clearly defined guidelines within our district rules and regulations.
Thank you. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. We had our planner here, Andre Isakov, who's now left us. But when he was here, we liked what he was doing. He went through all of the policies and procedures and documents that we had, and this was something that he brought forward that has been passed but has not actually been implemented by our council and by our planning staff to date. So it is something that we have on the books. We've passed it. And I think this is the first time that it's come forward and we're following the guidelines that we've actually put in place. So I would say it would probably come forward with other developments going forward.
Councillor Mueller.
Yes, thank you. I guess this would be a question for our planning staff here tonight. We have a variety of large-scale. I'm thinking specifically of the zoning bylaw coming in. I'm just wondering if that would be perhaps an appropriate place to enshrine this type of a guideline into something more concrete and provide and do it in a way that's fair to everyone. So if we can get some comment on that.
I'll ask you to turn off your mic so we can have Mr. Thompson respond. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair. It is actually the most appropriate place to do it in a large-scale bylaw update, as I believe I pointed out in my report. The current method of doing these one-time bylaw adoptions aren't in best planning practices, in accordance with both just general planning practice and BC planning practice. So it would actually be better suited to be located in the zoning bylaw as a whole, with density bonusing be located in there instead of having the policies outside in the OCP. This method can work, but it is, of course, at the discretion of council, which then brings up these questions of fairness and so forth.
All right. Thank you. Councillor Inkster?
Thank you. I think I wasn't sure where Councillor Shanks was in this, and I know he has an argument that's different from some others. So it'd be good to hear that. But I'm trying to determine if in fact we're going to introduce this as something acceptable to us in terms of this particular development. If now then, when we go forward, future developments will all be required to meet these standards. Is that what?
It sounds to me that's what we're heading to.
That's where we're heading, and I guess through you, because I asked it a few minutes ago, and I just Aaron has spoken to the previous question. I wanted to know if that's just confirmation of that, because it's not then a question necessarily of unfairness if in fact this is the beginning, you know, much like a DCC bylaw change, once it's implemented and then the first person gets subjected to the new fees, as long as a continuation, it's not a question of fairness at that point. So through you, thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure who I've got.
Through the chair, that would be, of course, a question of council's discretion. If that want to make that a condition of adoption of other similar applications that we have going forward. Without doing further analysis and not having a report forward, the main to do the best practices again would be going through the zoning bylaw and not doing this current practice. So,
thank you, Councillor Shanks.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, having made my original arguments, and then Councillor Seeger's sort of rebutting those comments by some movement in 2010 towards obtaining this end, I would say what's happened to all the other developments since 2010. So they were allowed to get away with not providing, you know, this amenity, and yet, and even more recently, other proposals in the West Sechelt area and East Porpoise Bay have not had to comply with this. And so from that aspect, it just seems unfair from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shanks. My comment would be everything has a starting point, so such as our DCCs. Any other comments? One more.
So I get to be the final word then? Is that, oh, okay, great. I love this. I just, a question though, because I know when the application came forward, and this may be a difficult one for Aaron, but I'm going to ask him anyway, and if he says he's not sure, that's okay. Watermark, do we know what standards they were required to meet? That was one that would have come just after that particular document was in place. Because I was not a member of the last council to make decisions on developments, but there were certainly developments that came at certain times previous to that.
Through you, Chair. I was not with the district that time, and I do not know the file intimately, so I cannot comment at this time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do we have some recommendations here? Councillor Seegers.
I'll move recommendation 2 as presented.
A seconder? Any questions or comments around the recommendation? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. So that does it for our business items. And I will look to our councillors for reports, and I'll start with Councillor Shanks. Sorry.
Not going to let me off the hook, so in view of previous business items having been postponed to a further public hearing, I guess I can tell you that last weekend I did in fact visit the Westbrook facility in Pitt Meadows. It's just on 198th Street, just off of Harris Road. And it's a fairly substantial building, somewhat blending into a residential neighborhood with a large park opposite and a large vacant lot behind it. That also gives me the opportunity of passing comment about after the last public hearing, and now we're going to another public hearing. I can share that information with you that I took it on myself to have a look at the facility being proposed up here with regard to the concerns and complaints. And I have fairly extensive comments to be made as a result of the upcoming public hearing as regards that. I haven't been that busy, so my mind's been wandering a little bit, and I'm sort of doing my best here to try and expedite and help our planning department out as best I can. And so last couple of days I came up with a notice of motion that I would like council members to consider to, from my perspective, to try and get some assistance in moving forward the backlog of development proposals that are currently under the realm of our planning staff. And I did speak with the corporate officer about this, and therefore members of council have that notice of motion. I'll just read it out to you if I might. And that notice of motion would read, prior to any new development proposals being sent out for referrals, that the planning staff would complete or compile one-page reports outlining the proposal and its compliance or non-compliance in terms of being within the urban containment boundary, supporting initiatives within the vision plan document and our current official community plan. And some years ago, we did have this happen where the planning department brought forward proposals to us just to have a very quick airing in terms of where council would be coming from should those proposals be brought forward. And this may assist the planning department in trying to move some of those in that file forward without having to do an extensive amount of work beforehand. So that's the gist of the notice of motion, which we will then be dealing with in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shanks. Councillor Inkster, your report, please.
Thank you. What is it that they say about idle hands?
Yeah. Sorry.
A number of us have been in a lot of meetings over the last couple of weeks, including some important administrative discussion meetings. I just wanted to mention one important event that I attended, which is important to, for the community in terms of safety and fire safety at the fire hall. I think a number of council members were there. And that was a good discussion with the fire department over commercial, but also a mention of residential safety and the importance of sprinklers and how quickly they have put down fires and have led to the saving of a number of commercial structures that have those sprinklers involved. Just to mention a couple of things in reference to the fire discussion, the fire department actually can step into a commercial premise because it's what would be considered or what we would define as public assembly. Just if they want, they can go into any commercial or public assembly building and make decisions based on the fire problems and or safety issues, but they have to be invited into residents, so they can't just answer. People assume that they can go into residents and check them out, but they actually have to be invited in. So if people are concerned about whether their home is safe, they have to actually ask them to come in. And another thing I wanted to mention that was really important, and when you go to those events, a lot of the stuff is common sense, but one of the things that they mentioned that I wanted to let the community know about is if you ever have an extinguisher and or go to use one, that you should always hit it on the ground twice before you use it, because otherwise you try to apply it to a fire that's going to get bigger if you don't deal with it quickly, and it either doesn't come out or it jams because you haven't shaken the settled contents in the cylinder, and or it hasn't been used ever, thank goodness. But if you hit it twice, you'll get maximum effect of an extinguisher, and it will most likely put out the fire and or put it down until the help can arrive. So it's a really important public safety message from Councillor Inkster. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I also attended the Downtown Business Association meeting at the fire hall, and I won't tell you the details of it because Councillor Inkster just did. It was an interesting meeting and fun. Also attended the forum on defending public health. Candidates for the Liberal Party, the NDP, and the Green Party were all there. And it was standing room only, and they turned 31 people away. It was a good meeting. Also attended the AGM for restorative justice, spent a day doing CAO interviews for the District of Sechelt, and then I went to a number of SCRD meetings, and I'll talk about those in a few minutes. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I had a few meetings. January 19th, I was invited to a housing roundtable with our MP, Pamela Goldsmith-Jones. We had a number of bodies there from various organizations. The Lions, they were talking about their new project that they want to come forward with over here. The Pender Harbor Seniors Group. We had Sue Jackal there with the seniors housing. So there were a lot of people, Vancouver Coastal Health, SCACL, the Sunshine Coast Association for Community Living, looking at what the needs are on the coast, not just affordable housing, but other needs as well. One thing that was nice to see was BC Housing was there. We had the Director of Operations for BC Housing, and his comment was, it's nice to have the federal government back at the table. He's been doing this for 26 years, and lately they've been missing. So it was very good. On the 20th then, so the next day, I was involved with a meeting with Vancouver Coastal Health, with the Executive Director of the Sunshine Coast Housing Society and BC Housing, and we were talking about the homeless shelter. So there are plans behind the scenes. We are still looking at options. In fact, while we were in this meeting, I just had an email come through that there's a meeting happening sometime, so we'll see where that's going. Once we have information, we'll be coming forward to the public and to council. On the 21st, I went to a library board meeting and 2 memorial services that day. It was a sad day, both young people who left our community way too early. On January 23rd, I spoke at Elder College on local government. So it was an opportunity to refresh my memory on BC local government structure. And one of the things that I found out, and it reminded me actually, was BC actually has a unique municipal government structure in all of Canada. So there are some things that happen out here that nobody else does, and to the fact that other countries are actually looking at BC and how we do our regional district structure and municipal government structure to see how they can adapt them to their own countries. Councillor Wright referred to the CAO interviews. We spent a day doing that. And then I just attended the public information meeting over at Seaside Centre with regards to the proposed new Wharf Avenue building. And then I want to address one final item. As most of you know, we had a public announcement this week of the registration of our Director of Engineering. And the community's been very vocal over the last few days in expressing their concern. We've had a number of senior staff leave. So I want to say that I, and I believe the rest of council, are also concerned. And I want to assure the community that upon the resignation of our Director of Planning, not this one, we changed our recruitment team from a subset of council to all of council. And so now we all are actively involved in the CAO recruitment, and we expect to have an announcement shortly about that position. So we want to thank you for your concern and for your comments, and know that we are doing all we can to support our community. Thank you.
Councillor.
I just wonder, why would you do rezoning? Like if something's zoned for something, some guy spends $3.7 million on a property.
I'm sorry, sir. We're in the middle of a meeting. Thank you. Questions at the end. Councillor Mueller.
Thank you. Yeah, before I put my report forward, I just wanted to acknowledge the presence of one of our partners from the SIGD, Councillor Chris August, in the room to share the meeting. It's great to see you. And yeah, no, I think for most of council, we were most enthralled with the CAO recruitment in the last couple weeks. That's kind of been the main focus for us. Of course, we need that key position filled going forward, but there's been something on my mind as well, kind of to echo some of the thoughts of Councillor Seegers, but to put it in a different light is the media, council, and people who come to meetings here, what we see is we see the managers, we see council, and what we don't see is all the people, the vast majority of this organization that are working away, often behind the scenes, and often are not getting recognition for, I think, what has really been fantastic work. It hasn't been the most stable environment, but these people have been coming to work every single day, and from what I see, they've been putting their best in. I think we can do a little bit better and help them do their jobs, but I think that, for me, in the last 2 years has really been the story. So that's the way I feel about it. It's a kind of a positive recognition of some of the hard work that a lot of people have been doing behind the scenes. And as you can see, you know, things are still moving ahead in the strokes that they are. And I think it's really is a credit to those people. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Mueller. My report is very similar to the other councillors. I too attended the Downtown Business Association meeting with the fire department. And for me, what I took away is someone who worked for years in the school district where fire drills were so very important to the safety of all of the students and the workers. That's something that an awful lot of small businesses have never even taken into consideration. The fact that they should have planned exits for themselves, their workers, and their customers. And I could see the light go on for a lot of the people who were attending. You think I'll just go out the door, but that isn't always the possible route. So you do need to think ahead and plan ahead and let your staff know so they can direct people. I also attended the Restorative Justice Annual General Meeting. They had an incredible speaker, and some of the things he spoke about that night, I carried home with me and attended the next day a youth committee meeting. And an awful lot of the issues that he spoke of were very evident in that meeting, in the reports from the community organizations that work with youth, with drugs, alcohol, bullying, all those issues. And so it was a real good connection for me. I have to say with great shame that I missed the Women's March. I, for some reason, had it as a 12 o'clock start and it was 10, so I missed it. I also attended the public meeting around the planned privatization of the health facilities, and that was well attended and well behaved. Good information. That's my report. I would also like to thank the councillors who have spoken about our staff. They are very important to all of us, and we know that as a community of workers who really provide nothing but service, they do it well. So thank you for that recognition. I also will now turn to Councillor Wright to give us our SCRD report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Attended, as the council representative on the regional district, I attended 2 corporate and admin services committee meetings. There were a number of items on the first committee meeting, but the most significant one was the SCRD released an RFP regarding the aquifer in terms of location, yield, suitability, quality, and costs. So that has a direct impact on future water supply. Attended the Policing Commission. 3 things of note on the Policing Commission. Each police officer currently carries 2 doses of the antidote for fentanyl as information. And there was a residence in Sechelt that was raided, and they found hard drugs, chemicals, drug paraphernalia, and cash, all which of which seized. And currently the staffing at the RCMP office is at 106%. They have a couple people overstaffed. Okay, there's quite a turnover in staff, and he's anticipating that there will be a couple of changes in the next couple of weeks to a month. Also attended the Transportation Committee meeting. And I have some stats here from BC Ferry, which I'll pass on to Councillor Shanks in case he doesn't have those. And I spent 2 wonderful days in budget, 2 full days. It was a delightful time. I was just getting prepared for when our budget comes before us. These are all the easy decisions in round 1, and they'll be coming back, okay, to round 2. That's when all the tough decisions will get made, and that's in March. And then I attended the board meeting, and that was pretty straightforward. There wasn't really anything that really impacted us here. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the work. So now we come to item 12, information, release of closed meeting. Nothing to release? Oh, that's next. Oh. Council correspondence, pages 58 to 64. Moved receipt by Councillor Seegers, second Councillor Wright. Any comments, anything to be dealt with specific? Seeing none, all those in favor of receipt? Thank you. Motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all those in favor? Thank you. And now I'll look to questions. Yes, Pam.
What about conserved soils? When it comes to the smell, you people don't drive out there. Go drive out there, and about 3 days ago, it kind of stopped. It really drank. And I'd like to know where there are 100 tons or 1,000 tons of fish coming from. You know, that's pretty, and they're pure organic. You confuse with organic. And all those things need to be stays there, you get almost a seashell. So when they talk about how they're doing this and doing that, they cut down the odor. Secondly, the clamshell / gazebo at Mission Park. I was talking to a few people, plus Mark Pearson, and apparently, and actually Bruce, the mayor, at the last meeting said that not very many people are really in favor with that thing. So why is it coming back? If the Rotary have to build something, tell them to go buy a piece of property and do it. Or, you know, that useless piece of property on the other side of the creek, tell them to put their clamshell there. And then you can have kumbaya music in the summer. But to ruin a really pretty piece of property just for the sake of some little, it's like gilding a lily, you know? It's nice there, you don't need it. It's just, it's a pleasant place. And if somebody wants to go sit there and listen to some music, you can take a blanket, sit on the grass and listen to somebody play some music.
Thank you.
It's my line and listen to it.
Any other comments or questions? Questions preferred. Yes. Mr. Parfit?